Alright guys, so since there is a new combat art in the game, I am going to be ranking every combat art from worst to best. Now this new combat art is a bit glitchy, so I will be explaining that a little bit further in this video, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and let's get right into it. Alright, so coming in 12th place is going to be the worst martial art in the game, and surprisingly guys, it's actually going to be boxing. Now boxing is the only martial art in the game that actually hinders you more than it helps you. Now even though the cooldown is low, and even though it does a decent amount of damage, this may seem a little bit crazy, but this combat art actually has so much end lag to the point where half the time when you use this on someone, it actually will hurt you more than it helps you, because since there's so much end lag, if they're not blocking when you use this ability and you guard break them, then they will immediately be able to attack you back. So I told him to start spamming M1, so I just want to show you guys the actual end lag attached to it. Never mind, he's lagging, but you guys get the point. It has so much end lag attached to it that they can actually M1 after you use this ability, and it will actually allow you to it will actually make it so they can M1 you before it's actually over. So this will be getting, you know, the very not respectable place of last on this list, and if you have this martial art, I feel a little bit bad for you. The coming in 11th place is actually going to be the base combat. Now this one's obviously, you know, the basic combat. There's not much to say about this. It's just, it doesn't affect anything at all, so it is what it is. I'm not going to talk about this that much. You guys know what this is. It's the base combat. And the coming in 10th place is actually going to be the Muay Thai combat art. Now the Muay Thai combat art is honestly, I think it's borderline worse than base combat, but I do actually think that the weapon spec has some merits in, you know, some very odd situations. Like since it is an AoE ability, you might be able to catch someone off guard with this, you know, in the air, but it is an extremely predictable ability because it is one of the only martial arts with a lot of startup attached to it. So I do actually think this is borderline worse than combat art, but you know, since it does have a small ragdoll stun attached to it, I'll be putting it just slightly above base combat. All right, so coming in 9th place is going to be the Jeet Kune Do martial art. Now Jeet Kune Do is going to be in 9th place, honestly, because I do think it's a very basic martial, but while I do think it's a very basic martial, I do think it is quite a decent martial as well. Jeet Kune Do, even though it's in 9th place, I do recommend people use it. If you guys aren't really that great at the game, Jeet Kune Do is a pretty solid one to get, just because it's a very easy to use martial art. You know, it goes into an air combo. Air combos are extendable based on, you know, what you know about air combos, and I do think, you know, the fact it's an air combo extender definitely makes it a bit worse than the other ones, but at the same time, air combos are, you know, very okay in the game right now, and Jeet Kune Do just being a very easy to use martial definitely makes it rank, you know, higher than the other ones. The coming in 8th place is going to be the Vanishing Clone Barrage. Now this is the only martial art in the game that actually breaks stronger block, so that is actually a really cool thing attached to it. I'm pretty sure boxing only breaks normal block. This one actually breaks stronger block. It actually is a ranged martial art that breaks stronger block. It also is one of the easiest to hit M1s in the game, just because it does hit an AoE around you. As you guys can see, he's off to the side and he is getting hit, and then you can do this for some free damage output. So I think it's a very solid combat art. It's kind of like, you know, you can't really go wrong with this, hence why it's going to be a little bit, you know, less than halfway through the list. The coming in 7th place is going to be Lariat Fist. Now Lariat Fist, I'm just going to be honest here guys, this is a terrible combat art. I was actually using the combat arts against others in PvP, and I'm just gonna be frank with you guys, this combat art is you know, pretty dookie. So not only is it just a worse MMA, but the actual weapon spec of it has the chance to miss, so you can like aim in their direction, completely hit them, and you will still miss it from time to time. I just think that, you know, that being a feature in this game honestly makes this martial quite bad, but I do think this martial is better than the ones below it, just because, you know, it is a combo extending martial art, but I do think that, you know, the fact it misses a lot of the time definitely ranks it a lot lower than it would be otherwise. The coming to 6th place is going to be the MMA martial art. Now obviously guys, this is kind of the bread and butter combo extending martial art. Extremely easy to use, extremely simple, you know, decently low cooldown. There's not really much to say about it. It's kind of just the most basic combo extending martial in the game, and I definitely think, you know, it kind of just halfway through the list is the perfect spot for a very basic combo extending martial. The only issue with MMA is that your cursor has to be exactly on them to hit it, but if you have, you know, a bit of skill in this game, that shouldn't be an issue. All right, so coming in 5th place is going to be the Gravity Art style. Now this is the only style in the game that actually ragdolls on basic M1s. Not that that really matters, simply because, you know, there is hit stun attached to the M1s as well. I mean, like, since there's hit stun attached to the M1s, the ragdoll really isn't the cool thing about this, but I definitely think it's a very cool feature if that's what you're into. But what is the best thing about the Gravity Art style is definitely going to be the Q spec, which does a significant amount of damage if you have multiple people stacked on top of each other. It also hits multiple people, which is why it does so much damage to multiple people. It also is it's an AoE auto tracking ability that does hit many people around you. Now coming to 4th place, it could be Water Dragon art. Now this was a kind of a secret, you know, secret buff that didn't really happen in the public eye, but the stun of Water Dragon is now as long as the Water Prison stun, so now it's just a ranged Water Prison stun. There's not really much else to say about it. I mean, if you guys need a place lock stun that's ranged and, you know, it's quite fast as well, like, it obviously depends on the distance because it's one of those traveling ones, but it's quite a fast ability. It is range, it is instant due to, you know, it being a weapon spec, and the cooldown is quite low for the stun that it actually has. So I definitely think this martial is a little bit underrated at the moment. I definitely think people will probably be picking it up after this video. Now, coming in third place is going to be the Toad Flame martial art. Now, the Toad Flame martial art is one that does have a bit of a higher skill floor than the other ones, just because the M1s do more damage if you stall them out. The weapon spec is good when used in conjunction with the other abilities. So if you like slow M1 them, you will do more damage. The weapon spec, while it can extend, is kind of hard to extend with, just because, you know, it has a bit of end lag attached to it. But it's a pretty good martial art if you actually know what you're doing in this game. Generally, if you see, you know, one of the top 3 martial arts and they're actually using it, they probably, you know what they're doing with the martial art in general. And this is definitely the most cool martial art, besides, you know, maybe the newest one. It's also the highest damage martial art. The coming in second place is going to be my personal favorite martial art in the game, Hurricane Fist. Now, you guys probably know by now that I use this quite a bit. I'm sure you guys have seen it in some of my videos. This is actually my favorite martial art. Now, the reason for this is because the Q spec is actually a really good, you know, basic combo extending, you know, ability in general. And I do think it's a very cool traveling ability as well. It's also the only combat art that adds a bit of drip onto you. The other ones don't really do this, so that I think that's a pretty cool thing. It also can bypass block if you hit behind them and stuff like that, because it is a ragdoll stun. Now, the only issue with Hurricane Fist is that the M1s do a slight pull to them, which actually can affect your combos if you don't know how to, you know, properly deal with it. Probably the first few times you fight with Hurricane Fist, you probably will mess up your M1s. But I do think the Q spec, you know, how good it actually is, especially for traveling, things like that, it definitely is worth using. And I definitely think it is definitely the second best combat art in the game. Now, this one I'm not actually going to be ranking on the tier list. It's going to be the puppet style. Now, I do think that this is going to be matched for being second or third place, depending on what bugs they fix from this actual martial art. But this martial art has the very weird feature of being able to extend your M1's distance. So even if you have large M1s, for some reason the puppet art style will actually extend your M1 damage, as you guys can see. So you guys could do like weird combos where you do like 3 M1s into an air combo, then you could actually do you know, pretty big combos afterwards. But I definitely think that, you know, this martial has a lot of bugs attached to it as well. Sometimes when you M1 things, you just get randomly flung across the map. I'll also say this, they definitely reduced the M1 range from the showcase video, because in the showcase video, the M1 range was pretty, you know, significant. It was honestly really cool in my opinion. So I do think that, you know, they kind of missed out when they changed the M1 range to being quite smaller, because I do think, you know, having the funny M1 range would have been absolutely hilarious for this actual martial art. But as it stands right now, I do think the martial art is pretty weird. I definitely think, you know, it needs some fixes, maybe some buffs attached to it. And the reason why I'm not going to be ranking it is because by the time you guys watch this video, it might be changed. Also, the Q spec of it is really nothing, you know, to look at that much. It's just a quick 44k damage, you know, extender. Also, it does make your M1s really weird sometimes. Like, you can't actually do double M1s sometimes based on, you know, where the clone actually is. I'm just going to show you guys, you know, the big extended M1s, which I think is, you know, kind of funny because it actually just straight up takes your M1s. So if you, as you guys can see, I am M1ing from here, and the M1 range will be slightly higher from the puppet. But, you know, since the puppet only goes so far, generally it's not really going to be extending your range that much. But I definitely think it's a very unique martial art in the game. I think, you know, it's a pretty good addition. I definitely think the range needs to be a little bit higher to make it a lot more, you know, functional, because as it stands right now, it's kind of just basic M1 range if you're not using, you know, a buffed M1. But other guys, what is the combat art you use the most in Shindo Life? In the comments below, we'll be checking them out. Now, the best martial art in the game, aka number 1, is going to be Jokai Fist. This one should be obvious. It is the only martial art in the game that can extend certain abilities. So if you guys want to get a pretty decent, you know, combo extending kit, you definitely need to be using Jokai Fist, just because Jokai Fist has a little, you know, it has a little bit more hit stun than the other M1s. Like you guys can see at the end here, it has a slight more amount of hit stun, and, you know, there's less end lag to the actual final M1. So that's the reason why you're actually able to use abilities when you wouldn't be able to otherwise, which definitely makes this martial rank higher. I think it's a pretty unfair reason to rank something higher, but it definitely is something to consider. It's why a lot of the higher tier PvP players that you see, they kind of all use Jokai Fist, because it makes, you know, combos generally easier. If they have combos with some other things, you will be using it, you will be seeing it, but generally the rule of thumb is if you see someone using Jokai Fist, there's a slight chance that they actually know what they're doing compared to the other martial arts. It's very rare with someone using a different martial art that knows what they're doing, because, you know, Jokai Fist is just a very easy to use, simple combo extending, you know, just M1s. Anyways, guys, that's for this video. If you enjoyed this video, guys, bye bye.